Yesterday, Donald Trump held a remarkable meeting of all European leaders and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And the topic is obviously something that Congress is going to care a ton about, which is peace in Ukraine, peace between Russia and Ukraine, and the idea of security guarantees. Good morning, I'm Jake Sherman.
And I'm Andrew Desiderio.
And welcome to the Daily Punch, brought to you by Punchbowl News. It is Tuesday, August 19th, 2025. Let's get into the mix. Here are your Washington headlines of the day. Number one, how would Congress view security guarantees for Ukraine? Number two, how Brian Schatz locked up the whip race. And number three, David Schweikert mulls an Arizona governor bid. Let's get into it. If you're watching the Daily Punch this morning, you will see several bizarre things. Number one, my background is different. And number two, Andrew is in a recognizable location if you are a Washingtonian, which is Washington National Airport.
That's right.
An institution that we've written a lot about in Punchbowl News. Andrew is on the road. He was in Arizona, he was in Nevada. Now he's heading to another state. We're not going to mention it for competitive reasons, although I don't think anyone would hop on a plane because Andrew tells them to. But he is gonna be coming with us from the road this week with a bunch of reporting that he's doing on power in the Senate. But we are going to start off this morning with the top story of the morning, which is yesterday, Donald Trump held a remarkable meeting of all European leaders and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And the topic is obviously something that Congress is going to care a ton about, which is peace in Ukraine, peace between Russia and Ukraine, and the idea of security guarantees, which Steve Witkoff, the top Trump aide, described as an Article 5-like structure that would have the United States, at least in part, guarantee security for Ukraine from the Russians. Andrew, this is your area of expertise, foreign policy, and specifically Ukraine, which you have traveled the world in part writing about. Give us, what is a security guarantee? Let's start with that, and we'll get into everything else. But what would a security guarantee mean for Ukraine and for the European community and for the global world order?
Well, first and foremost, it would be it's really the thing that Ukraine wants right now, right? Because they're not going to get into NATO. They're not going to get that Article 5 protection. But with the Trump administration floating something that is what they say Article 5 like, that's the best thing they can get at this point, right? What we don't know is what it's going to look like and how it's going to be structured. The president multiple times did not rule out the idea of U.S. troops on the ground in Ukraine being part of that security guarantee. But in reality, it's probably going to be dominated by the Europeans. But again, we don't know what the structure of this is going to be at this point. It's too early to say. And the president didn't offer any specifics.
Yeah, and Article 5, for those of you who don't know, which I assume is a very small minority, is basically the in the NATO organizing documents that if one member of NATO is attacked, it's an attack against the entire organization. It's attack against all member states.
Only invoked once in history.
Only invoked once in history, and that was on September 11th, or after September 11th. And to be honest with you, Andrew, if you think about Donald Trump and you think about the changes he has brought to Washington and the political scene and the political order, the global security framework, I would say that the increasing isolationist strain that is running through the Republican Party is probably the most notable change he has brought, right? He has brought a Republican Party, as we write in the newsletter this morning, that was for kind of global expeditions to bring democracy to the world. He has brought the Republican Party to embrace an increasingly isolationist point of view, an increasingly not anti-Ukraine as a country, but anti-funding Ukraine point of view. And there is a chance, based on what we know now, if you're describing this as an Article 5-like construct, that European nations, number one, and number two, the United States could be in some way, shape, or form dragged into lasting responsibility, at least, for Ukraine's security. And it seems almost, I don't know about certain, but it seems likely, at least, that the United States would be in some way, shape, or form providing weaponry, weapon systems, defense systems for Ukraine for the foreseeable future. Don't you think that's probably if not a likelihood, certainly a possibility.
Yeah, it is quite remarkable when you think about it too, in terms of how Trump has sort of reshaped the Republican Party on foreign policy. The idea that we would be committing U.S. troops on the ground in Ukraine, which even up to this point has not even been a conversation, right? I mean, like
And by
even
the
under
way,
the Biden
that's
administration,
not a
right?
certainty right now, Andrew, right? Like they have
Right,
not said that directly, but
right.
if you're reading the tea leaves here, and well, I'll ask you this: is Europe? I mean, I don't know, but could Europe provide a security guarantee without the United States?
It's a good question. Beyond my expertise. I mean, look, I do think it is important to recognize here that the Europeans are looking to the United States to lead in this conflict resolution, right? And if that means that they're expecting the United States to contribute troops to this effort, if that's what it ends up looking like, again, all caveats here, all hypotheticals, then that's probably what it's going to take, right? But again, remarkable when you just think about how Trump has reshaped the Republican Party in this vein. And then the idea that we would be, again, in theory, committing troops on the ground, which wasn't even something that happened under the Biden administration when we were supporting Ukraine the way we were with weapons and the like.
Well, let's just wrap up after this, Andrew. Congress is going to come back in a couple weeks, not next week, but the week after that, after Labor Day. And Congress's role here is going to be important. It's not just going to be Donald Trump he could do a lot on his own, but I don't think with a global kind of security guarantee for the Ukrainians, I would have to imagine that Congress is going to be involved in some way, whether it's green lighting some sort of weapons sale, some sort of agreement. I mean, Congress is going to have to most likely be involved, wouldn't you say, in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, and I think one of the most likely ways we could see Congress get involved is through this bill, which we mentioned in the AM edition from Jim Risch, the Foreign Relations Chairman, and Roger Wicker, the Armed Services Committee Chairman, which would establish a fund at the Treasury Department allowing European nations to basically fund Ukraine's defense through the United States, right? Number one, it allows those European nations to get closer to that 5% threshold for defense spending, which was just agreed to at the most recent NATO summit. And number two, it would fulfill President Trump's sort of proposal, if you will, from a couple of months ago, saying, all right, the Europeans are going to primarily finance this using American equipment, right? I think that's one way we could see Congress be involved in this, and something that we could see, a majority, or if not close to it, of the Republican Party getting on board with.
And number two story of the morning, Brian Schatz has locked up the whip race. He got the endorsement from Chuck Schumer. He got enough support to become the number two Senate Republican when Dick Durbin retires after 2026. Andrew, you've been leading on this story all along. Talk to us. And this is reporting from Las Vegas. You are racking up frequent flyer miles. Hopefully, sticking to one airline, as I suggest, as a frequent traveler. But tell
Yes, sir.
us about your reporting on Brian Schatz.
Yeah, well, so I was in Arizona, I was in Nevada, so I got to talk to Senator Mark Kelly, Senator Jackie Rosen in those respective states, and they both led Senator Schatz's quote unquote whip team in his effort to become the Democratic whip, right? So I talked to them a little bit about how Brian Schatz was able to lock up the whip race so quickly and really so easily, if you think about it, given that we're like 15 months out
Yeah.
from leadership
Yep.
elections in the Senate Democratic caucus. And the overwhelming sort of consensus based on their conversations with members and the commitments that they got from others to back Brian Schatz was he's already been doing the job essentially, right? He's the guy who's always on the floor. He's talking with the floor secretaries, Democratic and Republican, that being Gary Myrick and Robert Duncan. He's got those relationships already. He's the guy who you go to and you say, "Hey, what's happening on the floor right now? What the heck is happening? What are the Republicans trying to do right now? How do we combat it? Things like that, right?" But something I think is important to add in terms of how Brian Schatz was able to do this was that he has been able to successfully straddle two very important camps of the Democratic Party. Number one is this sort of old guard and the existing leadership, right? He's been the chief deputy whip for the last couple of Congresses. He has maintained a close relationship with Chuck Schumer, with Dick Durbin, certainly. And Chuck Schumer sort of took him under his wing and mentored him a little bit in that respect. But number two, Senator Schatz has been able to help sort of groom a new generation of Democrats. He's only 52 years old. He got to the Senate when he was in his, I believe, in his late 30s. So he's been in the Senate for a long time, especially when you consider how young he is by Senate standards, that being 52 years old. But he's been able to straddle both of those camps. And I talked to Mallory McMorrow, who's running for Senate in Michigan. She's been very critical of existing Democratic leadership, of Chuck Schumer. She specifically mentioned the fact that, Brian Schatz is going to become the next whip. And that being, in her view, a very good thing, because it shows that, that Democrats are going more toward leaders who are not just of the younger generation, but came up in politics in a different era, right? She said that, Chuck Schumer came up in this very different era of American politics. And she said Brian Schatz is someone who sort of meets the moment that we're in right now in terms of, countering the Trump administration and all of that. So I know that was a long-winded way of sort of going through this, but I think it's worth pointing out that Senator Schatz hasn't just started this a few months ago or even a couple of years ago. He's been at this since really before Mark Kelly and Jackie Rosen even got to the Senate.
Let's also mention that Brian Schatz is from Hawaii, which is certainly a different geographical balance to the Senate Democratic leadership. And Dick Durbin and Chuck Schumer have been atop the party for a long time. And they're trailing a little bit House Democratic leadership, which has seen a big turnover in the post-Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer era. And let's be clear, Brian Schatz's ascendance to this spot, which is expected and almost guaranteed at this point, would put him in line to be the Democratic leader after Chuck Schumer retires, whenever that might be. The number 3 story of the morning, a scoop that we had yesterday, David Schweikert, the Arizona Republican, is mulling a run for governor, which would take him out of his House race in the Scottsdale area. This was a scoop from myself, John Bresnahan, and Ali Mutnick, mostly Ali and Brez, but I tagged along for fun. And Schweikert is, Andrew, you were just in Arizona. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Schweikert is a Republican who was elected in the 2010 class, a budget hawk who has at least been, let's say, charitably somewhat frustrated with Congress. If he gets in the gubernatorial race, 2 big impacts. Number 1, he would be running against Andy Biggs, a fellow House Republican from Arizona who's also seeking the nomination. And number 2, it would leave a big opportunity for Democrats in that Scottsdale area seat. This is a seat that attracted millions of dollars. I was there last cycle. Millions of dollars of investment from Republicans and Democrats. Schweikert does have a great turnout operation. He is a known quantity in the House Republican leadership world. He's a known quantity in Arizona. It would be a big opportunity for Democrats and a big hole to fill for Republicans. Andrew, having just been out there, what do you see if Schweikert were to step aside and run for governor instead of the House?
Well, this was already going to be a really close race. I talked to one of his potential Democratic opponents, Marlene Gallan Woods, and she, look, I mean, it's going to be a crowded Democratic primary for that race, of course, and she's seen as sort of the favorite, the front runner at this point. But I think it really improves Democrats' chances of flipping that seat if he doesn't run, right? Especially if you're going to have a contested primary on the Republican side, too. So this is something that both parties are going to be looking to in terms of David Schweikert's decision here, which should come, as you guys reported, by the end of the month.
And Andrew, you will join us tomorrow from the road where you are writing the top. So we'll unveil where you will be after by tomorrow morning. And with
I'll be in a hotel room that time.
Yeah, well, again, hotel points. Hope you get them. And with that, leave us a rating and review. You could subscribe to Punchbowl News at punchbowl.news. Have a great day and stay safe, everyone.